I'm Dr. Mark Hatala, and I want to welcome you to the 12th chapter of Bradbury and Karney's Intimate Relationships book. So today we'll be discussing interpreting experience. So how people process information, the origins of their beliefs and values, and what motivated reasoning is. But let's get started by talking about how many of our experiences are subject to multiple interpretations. So is a kiss just a kiss, a sigh just a sigh? And that's, of course, from Casablanca. I saw a comedian one time, though, and he was talking about the difference between a date and a date date. Are you going on a date or is it like a date date? And he said that it was a date date because he spent money. Information processing refers to all the ways our mind organizes everything we learn about the world. So a belief is a person's idea or theory about what the world's actually like. So an example would be couples who fight a lot are probably unhappy. That's a belief. A value is a person's opinion or attitude about what's important and how they want things to be. So infidelity is a good reason to leave a relationship is an example of a value. Specific observations provide the foundation for beliefs about a partner's qualities, and those beliefs in turn support general feelings about whether a relationship is satisfying or not. So for example, like in the picture to the right, maybe your partner's drinking a beer, and that could be interpreted in a couple different ways. So maybe they're drinking the beer because they're thirsty, which has no bearing on the relationship. Maybe they're drinking it because they love beer, which is a general characteristic of the partner. And maybe my partner has a drinking problem, which is a threat to the relationship. Now, when describing other people, we tend to use labels for beliefs that are general enough to connect specific behaviors to some higher meaning, while still specific enough to distinguish one person from another. So, for example, we may say that somebody's dependable. And so, because dependable is very measurable. Do they get there on time? Do they say what they're going, or they do what they say they're going to do, instead of good? Because what does good mean? We also do this to link specific observations to several different meanings that are more general. So being punctual is linked to being dependable or being compulsive. It depends how we want to interpret it. How do we evaluate our relationships? Well, the ideal standards model says that the comparison between what we value in relationships generally and what we perceive to be true for our current relationship determines whether we'll be satisfied. So this talks also about a longitudinal study of college students, and they showed that initial relationship satisfaction in students who believed in romantic destiny, that there was a person for you, and that's where love comes from, versus that you have to work for love, was a strong predictor of longevity. The longevity for students who didn't believe that they had a soulmate was unrelated to their initial satisfaction. To lessen the ambiguity of social interactions, we tend to interpret our experiences by drawing on our beliefs and expectations. So the interpretations are probably going to be consistent with and thus confirm the ideas that we already have. And this is the idea of perceptual confirmation, that we expect people to behave in a certain way, and then we perceive that behavior in a certain way. Behavioral confirmation is the process through which our beliefs and expectations can shape the way we experience the world by affecting our behavior. So an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy is that behavior that leads to an experience that is expected to happen. And so I'm a huge believer in this confirmation bias too. I think people are driven by what's called the availability heuristic, which is how readily things are brought to mind, and whether what they're presented with matches what they believe anyway. That's confirmation bias. But self-fulfilling prophecy lies at the heart of attachment perspectives for intimate relationships. So secure and insecure attachment styles cause people to interact with their partners in ways that confirm and strengthen the original models, internal models. So that people who are secure tend to have secure relationships. People who are insecure tend to have insecure. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what's the origins of beliefs and values? Well, this is where the idea of culture comes in. So culture is the shared attitudes, beliefs, norms, and values of people who speak the same language and share a geographic area during a specific period of time. So for example, I'm recording this in Missouri because I live in Missouri. And 500 years ago, there were very different people living in Missouri and speaking a very different language. And 500 years from now, there'll probably be a different culture here too. Now, in Western societies, it's common to eat together to show romantic interest. However, there's other cultures where food and romance never go together. And in the newer culture, if you're interested, if a man is interested in a woman, he'll go to her where she lives and just chant poems. And that's how he shows he's interested. Similarly, divorce rates are 3 times higher in the United States than Mexico. And that's just, those are 2 countries just separated by a river, the Rio Grande. And so there's a different culture in those 2 different places. Mass media plays a large role in the beliefs and values that people hold about relationships, especially in Western culture, at least according to your book. For example, the way relationships are portrayed has been shown to affect what people believe about relationships in general, how they evaluate their own relationships, and how they behave. Now, that picture is from Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and that's Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And they've said that that movie showed their children how they fell in love. Now, the inconvenient truth to this is that Brad Pitt was married at the time to America's sweetheart, Jennifer Aniston. And so maybe that taught people that it's okay to leave your partner if you find somebody you like better. But, she was America's sweetheart, for heaven's sakes, if you've seen Friends. Exposure to media can influence beauty standards, ideas about sex, and even how early teenagers begin having sex. So adolescents who watch the most TV with sexual content were twice as likely to have sex in the next year. And they found that they essentially had the same level of sexual contact as people who were 2 to 3 years older than they were. Motivated reasoning is all the ways our motives, desires, and preferences shape how we select, interpret, and organize information for the purpose of satisfying specific needs and achieving certain goals. So people are motivated to process information in ways that favor certain interpretations over others about their partner because they want to like their partner if they're in a good relationship. So a motive is a drive to reach a specific goal, and a bias is a tendency to process information to protect a particular point of view. So enhancement, believing the best. The enhancement motive is the desire to believe that their relationship is successful, that their partner is worthy of trust, and their investment of time and energy in the relationship is justified. So there's an enhancement bias, which is that we process information that supports and strengthens the desired positive belief in the success of the relationship. So people tend to idealize their loved ones. In happy marriages, spouses rate each other more positively than their friends rate their spouse. And so it's like, well, you know them the best, and so you know that they're fantastic. Satisfied partners tend to view each other and their relationship in a highly positive light. How about accuracy, though? This is the desire to understand a partner and to be understood in return. But especially early in the relationship, we want the truth. And somebody might say that we can't handle the truth, but we want to know. So there's a diagnostic bias, a preference for information that may indicate important qualities of a partner or a relationship. And this can lead people to read meanings and intentions into specific behaviors that may or may not actually be there. So you look for deeper meanings in things, in the way that they say something, or in a gift. My niece, when she was much younger, my sister and her would analyze these gifts that she would get from her boyfriend and eventual husband. What did they mean? What was the underlying, what were they trying to say? So as I said earlier, confirmation bias is a preference for information that supports what's already known about a partner or a relationship, what we want to believe. And studies show that if people are given positive information about their spouse that they don't agree with, that they reject it because they're like, well, yeah, whatever. I don't believe that. The justification motive is the desire to feel that you're moral and reasonable. So in a troubled relationship, focusing on our partner's negative qualities may increase our self-esteem by relieving us of any responsibility for the failure of the relationship. And there's a self-serving bias here. And this is the tendency to take credit for our successes and blame others for our failures. And that's actually psychologically very healthy. The self-serving bias, though, neither serves accuracy nor enhancement in a relationship, but allows each partner the comfort of blaming the other. Now, how do we respond to negative experiences? And that's Jean Piaget to the right there. And he says that we have accommodation and assimilation. So accommodation involves changing existing beliefs in order to accept new information, so we learn from experience. And assimilation is integrating new information with existing knowledge without changing the original beliefs. And that's what happens most of the time with people we know well. We just add new information. Selective attention is when there's a whole bunch of information, we pay attention to only some of it, and the process is not entirely conscious. So selective attention allows us to focus on information that supports our relationships and pay less attention to information that threatens the relationship. People who were committed to their current partner, this was a study they did where they showed people pictures of attractive people. And people who are committed to their current partner and felt close to them spent less time looking at pictures of attractive people. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Other people are less attractive when you're happily in a relationship. There's also a memory bias. And this is recalling the past in ways that supports and justifies your current views and feelings. Now, we think of memory like it's a video camera, but it's really not. It's really a combination of what we remember and what the current status is, and maybe things that we've been told or pictures we've seen too. So partners want to believe that they're in a satisfying relationship, and so they might assimilate disappointment by simply forgetting that their satisfaction has declined. Selective attention means noticing consistencies and disregarding inconsistencies. And a memory bias usually operates so consistent information is remembered and inconsistent is forgotten. What about protective attributions? Well, an attribution is a way of explaining or interpreting someone's behavior, and it has two aspects: the locus dimension and the stability dimension. Now, the locus dimension is whether the cause of a person's behavior is internal or external to that person. So let's say somebody's late. An internal explanation would say that they're late because they're careless. And an external would be that they're late because there's bad traffic. The stability dimension determines whether the cause of the behavior is temporary or stable. So using the same example, if someone's running late, a temporary explanation would be, or attribution would be traffic. A stable one would be they're just careless. So if someone buys flowers and we interpret it that they did it because they love you, that's a stable internal attribution. And satisfied couples tend to give each other credit for positive behaviors and excuse each other for negative ones. And distressed couples do the opposite, which is probably why they're distressed. Flexible standards say that whatever is currently perceived to be positive is considered important, and whatever is currently perceived to be negative is dismissed as unimportant. And so that seal is very flexible. Now, many people consider their standards to be very stable and that they don't change them. But social psychologists indicate that people's values and attitudes often change to justify their behavior. And that couples with flexible standards are usually resilient and respond well to the ups and downs of relationships. How about social comparisons? This is when you use information about others as a gauge of our own attitudes and abilities. And there are upward social comparisons and downward social comparisons. In an upward social comparison, we compare ourselves with others who are doing better than we are. People don't do that, though. They don't, or at least in relationships. You don't compare yourself to couples who seem much happier than you. A downward comparison is when we compare ourselves with others who are doing worse than we are. We tend to engage in downward social comparisons, especially when you feel your relationship is threatened. So you may be like, well, our relationship isn't doing so well, but look at those people. Their relationship is really bad, and here's why. So some types of negative information are easier to assimilate than others. The more obvious or severe it is, the harder it is for spouses to make sense of it within the positive view of the relationship. And this is the limits of motivated reasoning. So for example, infidelity is difficult to ignore, forget, or explain away. And so it has to be confronted. Integrating negative perceptions into positive ones does not make the negatives go away. So you might think about your partner. He's not very ambitious, but that just means he has more time to devote to our relationship. So, it's taking a negative and making it a positive. Now, this could be desirable at first, but if it doesn't change over time, that could lead to problems. And so it's like, well, he's not very ambitious. He plays PlayStation all the time. So that doesn't mean he's going to spend time with you. It means he's just going to, keep playing the PlayStation. So the limits of partners who have the most to lose are the ones who are most likely to engage in activities that strengthen their mutual commitment. So this idea of a commitment calibration hypothesis says that threats to a relationship should motivate activities to defend the relationship only if the threat is proportionate to the couple's level of commitment. So the researchers had people write stories to explain their partner's faults. And they found that satisfied partners magnified their partner's strengths and minimized their faults. And maybe that's why they're satisfied. So that's chapter 12, Interpreting Experience. And I hope you have a great day.